Hello everyone. So today I'm going to talk about my case study. So the first thing that I want to clarify is when we're talking about the goal of attendance, um, our big goal is to prioritize that student attendance, the student's well-being, and the student's connectedness to school, because this gives them a sense of belonging and opens up access to growing their brains cognitively, academically, and socially. So the first section is the case where Principal Rhodes is a first-year principal, and he was assigned to increase attendance at Golden Oaks High School. And depending on which page you looked on the case study, the school either has 965 students or 659. Either way, there's an 85% attendance, chronic absenteeism for attendance in the last several years, which is dramatically awful. So 5 students became the focus of the study with more than 10 days absence during the first semester. There's Karen, who was a honor student and is now recently married, and she's a senior. Her parents have requested teacher meetings. She's been missing tests, including end of semester tests. Tyrone is the second student. He's an honors sophomore. He's been going on trips with his parents, one to Canada, one to Washington, D.C., which can be seen as educational trips. Christina is a freshman, and her minister has been writing her notes to excuse her from school so she can go on church trips during school day. Her algebra teacher has requested that parent meeting. Carl is a sophomore who's in some vocational classes. He was sent to the truancy officer who visited the parents, and his father did reveal that he didn't graduate and didn't really see value in his son going to school because his son could just go work for him. And then John is their junior star athlete for the football team. He was hurt in the first game, and he attends PT twice a week. And then the athletic director started sending him home on Friday afternoons so he could rest before the games. Now, legally and ethically, there's 2 different sections that we'd like to look at in this. The Kansas State Department of Education, the legal statute is 72-1113C1, which says that if a student is absent more than 5 days in a semester without a valid excuse, they are considered truant. And chronic absenteeism, if you look into the definition, can occur with or without excuses. So in this case, all of these 5 students are chronically absent, but Carl is considered truant. He does not have any excuses. Legally, the school does need to define what they define as an excused absence, and then they need to follow board policy. According to the case study, the superintendent, they do have all of these board policies in place according to the Kansas compulsory school law, attendance law. And I did include a link to Wichita Public Schools because they have them very spelled out in what their board policy would be. Ethically, I think it's really important that teachers are consistently reporting those absences and how they accept late work. We also need school personnel, such as the athletic director, not to make excuses for absences based on star athletes. So that's going to be really important in what they do next. Now, summarization of what this case study is about. Attendance is a huge issue at Golden Oak High School, and it is due to a lack of consistency in teachers and staff reporting attendance. It also can be a misunderstanding as to what is required by the state for attendance, and that could be for parents or administrators or teachers. It could be everything, just a huge misunderstanding. So the facts, there are a lot of people involved in this. Of course, there's the students. There's a wide number of school staff, including a counselor who is not doing their job, an algebra teacher trying to reach out to students, an athletic director excusing people as his athletes, core teachers not recording athletic or attendance, I'm sorry, the principal who's a first year principal trying to step in and solve a problem that is massive, and then the superintendent asking for this problem to be solved. Parents, of course, are involved in this also. We have 3 different sets of parents, Karen's, Tyrone's, and Carl's, different things that they're doing. Additional adults, there's a truancy officer, the minister who's writing notes. Karen is recently married, so her husband should be involved. John, who was injured, his doctor and his physical therapist. Of course, they need to be reaching out to social services and juvenile court. The school is interesting in that it is a suburban school, but parents can travel 2 to 3 hours a day to try to get to and from work, which could cause a transportation issue for some of these schools. They have a large Caucasian population, but recently they've been increasing to have more Hispanic and Asian influence. On average, it's a middle income district, but there are some very low and some very high students to kind of balance that equation. Athletics seem to be a priority, and there are a lot of extracurricular activities offered. They do have very experienced teachers, which is almost a surprise they have gotten so lax in reporting this attendance. And then I've already said that 85% of students miss 10 or more days each year. As a school, they have some good things. They have a National Honor Society. They have vocational training with the CTE. They have a 9th through 12th grade building, but they also have a counselor who's not trying to resolve these issues and teachers who are not reporting attendance. So priorities, the first thing that I would see is the most important thing would be meeting with these students and discussing what's going on. If I'm definitely choosing 5 students to focus on, then I need to talk to them and find out what is going on in their lives. The second priority would be talking to staff. Staff needs to understand what is the law, what are the expectations that they have to report that attendance. And then the school needs to look at that school board policy and define it to those teachers. What does chronic absentee rates, what does it mean? Do they understand early absentee rates? Because if a student misses 2 days in the first 2 weeks of school, they're already considered chronically absent. And research is showing that those students who are absent in those first 2 days are going to continue that pattern. And then we need to determine what is an unexcused versus an excused absence. And if we have unexcused absences, how are we going to put a policy in place to complete the work that the students are missing? And then we also need to find a way to support those students who have a transportation issue or other barriers in getting to school. The next step after we talk to the teachers, the staff, we need to talk to our parents. So we need to send a letter to the parents explaining the parents' patrie. I have that Lunenburg 2011 defines that. And then I think an important aspect of this is, why don't students want to come to school? So let's do some relationship mapping and find which students have little to no adult connection. So we have every single student written on giant chart paper, and teachers have dots, and they put a dot next to the student that they have a really good relationship with. And then we can look at which students don't have any dots. And those students are going to get assigned an adult mentor. And those mentors are going to do the 2x10 relationship building, which means for 2 minutes every day for 10 days. They're going to meet up with that student and not talk about school. It's just talking about whatever the student wants to talk about. And at first it's awkward as all get out. But eventually you start figuring out some things that you have in common and you start building that relationship. And that makes that student want to come to school so that they can talk to you. Then we need more data. We need to compare that absentee rate with students receiving 1 or more Fs. We should be in that 80 to 15 to 5 kind of relationship or ratio. And then we also need to be looking at just in general course grades. If you have students missing a large amount of school and they're straight A students, what is that telling me about our rigor? Do students even need to be in school to complete the work? If they don't, then they're not going to see a purpose in that. And then finally, there needs to be some fidelity to checking monthly that review of attendance. But we also need to look at office discipline referrals, course grades, nurse visits, and then if you have a behavioral risk screener, what is that saying about your students? And then could we use the Kansas Communities That Care data for that student perception? So we want to make sure that students are seen. So we need kids greeted by name at the door when they walk into the building, maybe by the principal, which is what we did. The principal or the assistant principal, AD, was out in the parking lot greeting every student as they walked up by name. Teachers need to not be in their rooms sitting at a desk. They need to be at their doors. They need to be connecting with those students. And then we need to find ways for additional support staff to connect with students. We also need to set up a meeting with Carl's dad and talk to him about, because he talked about dropping out. I mean, having his son just worked with him. But if a student drops out after they turn 18, the student and the parent have to attend counseling sessions at the school before the parent can sign that legal disclaimer. So it's not just, Carl doesn't just have to go to school. There's parts that they have to have together. Then the athletic director, who's also a coach, and the superintendent need to meet with that principal, and they need to discuss the student athlete absenteeism. And participation in these extracurricular activities is a privilege. You need to attend school to be able to attend a game and play. That should be part of it. That should be a huge part of it. The next option is we pull some of that additional data. We need to pull the state assessment data. We need to pull the district data. We need to pull the ACT data. We need to look at our subgroups. We need to look and see if our rigor and our relevance is actually the issue. If kids don't want to be at school, they don't see it as relevant, they don't feel like they're learning something, then we have a bigger issue here. And then for Karen, her parents want to have a meeting. So let's get Karen and her new husband with her parents and discuss why she's missing school and can we make a plan for her success. And finally, meeting with that counselor, because the counselor's also dropping the ball, and that counselor needs to be looking at the students and how that counselor can be supporting them. So the pros of doing this is that students should feel safe and wanted when they go to school. We should also have attendance improve, which would mean test scores will improve. And then those 5 students that are identified should all graduate. Teachers also need to see the relevance of keeping attendance. And in doing that, they're checking on students. And of course, that is building the relationships with the students. And then, of course, when students feel like they belong, then parents are going to find value in sending their children to that school. The cons of this, teachers may get upset about this policy enforcement. You have a first-year principal coming in and telling them what they need to do after they've been there for years and this principal has not. You also might have teachers upset because their classes are not considered rigorous or relevant. And then students might be upset because all of a sudden when they could miss whenever they wanted, now they can't. And then it might be an issue where you're going to have to find a way to provide transportation to these students when they can't get to school. And then, of course, time is always an issue. This first year principal has to be incredibly busy at a high school, yet they're going to also be pulling data and analyzing